Good evening. Welcome to our program this evening. As we get started and waiting for a few others to come, let's sing We Have This Hope. It's number 214 in the hymnal.
We have this faith that
Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for the blessed Sabbath day that you've given to us, and time to just relax and enjoy the blessings that you've given to us today. We ask now that you will bless this meeting as our speaker speaks on mental acuity, and may we be able to learn and apply as we study this new school year. I pray in thy name, amen. I have a request. Can we all come to the center, press together? So, and in the front. So. Don't be shy. Our speaker this evening is Amanda Anguish, and she is no stranger at all to Weimar University. We've invited her for previous orientations as we begin our new school year. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she works at Beautiful Minds, which is in Auburn. And I think that you will be blessed by her sharing this evening on mental acuity. Thank you, Amanda, for coming, and please share with us. Okay, so can you hear me?
Through here. Okay. Yes, you're close. I'm going to move this up. Can my lovely assistant come and help me? My lovely assistant is my husband. I'm going to move this over a little bit too, just because I'm going to use this board. We're going to treat this like a classroom, because I like to think of myself as more of a teacher. Oh, now I made myself stuck. Okay, so if you want to come up further, you're more than welcome to. Does anybody know why you're here?
You want to be bright all semester.
You want to be bright all semester, is that what you said? Yes, I'm not so much going to teach you something, but how to do something. And if you know, anybody know what this area is historically known for? Tuberculosis. That too, but that's not what I was thinking of. That is accurate, but more the general area, not just Weimar. Anybody know what this area is known for historically? Gold, yes, the gold rush. And there's something interesting about the gold rush. And in fact, if you pay attention, if you go down to the river, you'd think it was still going on, because there are a lot of people that still go down to the river and pan for gold. In fact, it was maybe 2 summers ago, my husband and I and some friends were floating down the river in tubes, which is one of my favorite things to do here. And as we were floating down the river, my tube got a little bit further in front of the other 3 tubes, and I saw a body bobbing up and down in the water. And I remember praying, "Dear Lord, please don't let this be a dead body. I don't want to be the person to find this dead body." And it turned out not to be a dead body. It was somebody bobbing up and down in the water as they were scooping out sand looking for gold. But all I saw was a body like on the water kind of doing this with the head underneath. And I thought, oh, nobody wants to come across that. Unfortunately, that wasn't what happened. But as you pan for gold, nobody ever puts their pan in and then just takes whatever's in that pan down to the bank or wherever you go to figure out what you've got, and then say, "Hey, what can I get for this?" Does anybody ever do that?
That'd be nice.
That would be nice, but nobody does it because what do they know?
It's not gold.
Majority of that is at least sand. There's probably not much gold, if any gold, involved. What does it require? Sifting. It requires sifting. And that's the same with our thoughts. Did you want to say something?
One of my
gold mining as a hobby. And on top of sifting, he'll also pour in mercury in the bottom of the can, and that congeals with the gold into a black substance.
Oh, I'm learning something. I'm here to teach you something else, and I'm learning. That's awesome. I didn't know that. I'm going to have to look into this more because it's quite fascinating to me. But yeah, we have to sift until we get the gold. Do you know that's very much like our thoughts? We have upwards, research says, I don't know how they come up with this number, but research says we have upwards of 80,000 thoughts that go through our head in a given day. If you're anxious, you probably have the 80,000. Now we have downwards of maybe 12,000 thoughts that go through our head in a given day. So that's a lot of thinking that's going on. Now you might have come here to Weimar thinking that you were going to get an education, but I'm here to teach you not just how to get an education or how to learn or that sort of thing, but actually how to think. And I think that's one of the most important things you can do, and one of the things that almost none of us are taught how to do. And yet it's the thing we do all day, every day, we think. And the reason some people have problems is because nobody's ever taught them how to think. I know that was the case for myself when I was younger. I suffered from depression, but mostly anxiety. I had many anxious thoughts that went through my mind, and nobody ever told me, you know, Amanda, all of those thoughts that you have in your head, those aren't necessarily true thoughts, and they're not necessarily valuable thoughts. Just like if you sift through sand, most of that isn't gold. And so we have to be careful that just because we think something, we don't accept it as valuable just because we thought it. But a lot of us do that. We think just because we thought something, it must be valuable. And then we get very, what we call egocentric about it. Because I have this thought, it must be important, even if nobody else has this thought or thinks the same way. So I'm actually going to teach you how to think. And how many of you have ever done a study going through the Bible on the value and importance of thinking? This would be a really awesome homework assignment, just a personal assignment to do, to go through the Bible and just read it in terms of what does God say about my thoughts and my thinking. There's actually a third word that the King James Version uses in terms of thinking, and it's the word imaginations. A lot of people value imagination. They go, oh, my kid, I want them to have a great imagination, or my kid has a great imagination. But what happens when that imagination turns into unhealthy behaviors or unhealthy thoughts that lead to unhealthy behaviors? The Bible talks a lot about that, about evil imaginations and where that goes. And so I want to teach you how not to have evil imaginations and thinking, but how to have the right kind of thinking. Okay? So I love to teach this. This is one of my favorite things because it's one of the most basic things. And if you have a piece of paper, you know, I should have told you to bring paper beforehand, but I know you kind of came from something else that you probably weren't considering this. But if you want, at the end, if you have your cell phone on you, I will let you take a picture of it. So that would be appropriate. Okay, so what this is called, maybe you could call me an expert at thinking, but this is called the ABCs of CBT. So cognitive behavioral therapy comes from the idea that, and by the way, I don't ascribe to everything that is cognitive behavioral therapy. You'll probably hear a lot of CBT or cognitive behavioral concepts while you're on this campus, because I know Dr. Nedley values this kind of therapy. But I just want to let you know, if you did some research and that sort of thing, there are some things involved in CBT that I don't actually believe in. I don't think they're Christian. And so I'm not teaching you those things. I'm teaching you something that actually is very biblical if you consider it. And so as you do this, don't think that the whole of cognitive behavioral therapy is the best thing. I'm just teaching you a principle of it, okay? Every single one of my clients, though, comes to me for two reasons. Two reasons they think. One is their feelings. They all come to me because of their feelings. What kinds of feelings do you think they're experiencing? Negative, yes. And not all feelings are necessarily negative. Is sadness necessarily negative? No. But what happens when you add hopeless to sadness? What happens? Now you've probably got some pretty negative behaviors too that go with that. And so those are the two things, feelings and behaviors. Those are the reasons my clients come to me. What they don't realize, though, is they're actually coming to me because of their thinking. Because out of the abundance of their thoughts is their feelings and their behaviors. And so I'm going to use the ABCs of CBT to help you literally practice the kind of stuff that you should be doing with your own thoughts. So we call these the ABCs because there are 5 letters of the alphabet. You only have to remember 5 if you don't know your ABCs. And this is how we're gonna do this. So I want you to pay attention because this is something that you can do any time of the day, any day, and you can come to good conclusions about your own thinking. So the A stands for activating event. And the only reason we call it activating event is because it starts with a A. So this could easily just as well be triggers or stressors. And what are triggers and stressors?
The things that get you thinking.
Anything. Anything. We're not going to talk about the positive ones, though. We're not going to talk about the positive ones because you probably don't have a problem with the positive ones. We're just going to talk about the negative ones because you're not here because you have a problem with the positive ones. But triggers and stressors are anything that starts something. Just like the word activate, what does it mean? It starts something, it gets something going. And keep that in mind as we do this. But there's 2 different types of activating events. The first one we're going to talk about, not that these are in any order, is external. What does external mean?
Outside of me.
Yes, outside of me. So every single one of us have activating events that happen all day, every day. And the first group we're going to talk about is external activating events. So what would external activating events be? These would be people and circumstances. People and circumstances. So I'd like you to consider a person in your life, not the whole of the person necessarily, although some of us have triggers and stressors that are a whole person, we think, but more specifically, something that people say or do that triggers you, that activates something inside of you. Would anybody be willing to share something that activates them or triggers them that a person might say or do? We'll be kosher here too. Yes?
When Mom's unintelligible voice shouts something from across the hallway.
Okay. Okay, so is it your name or is it anything that you're doing? Anything. Okay, that's fair. Yeah, sometimes we have triggers and stressors that can be, a parent or something yelling something. Anyone else? You all have them. The important thing is that we're mindful of what these things are. Yes?
When you supposedly hear your name, but it's something else.
Okay. What does that do to you?
It makes you kind of look around frantically.
Okay.
Like someone's wanting me, but I can't find them.
Okay. Yeah, that would be a good one. You guys are giving me some pretty tame ones. One of the things that, oh, go ahead. Yes.
Other people driving.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now, you know what just happened when you said that? People started going, oh, now I know what she's trying to ask. Yeah, what is it about people driving that specifically triggers you? Is it driving too slow? Is it moving into your lane when they don't see you? Or
Driving like they don't know how to drive.
Okay.
Like they should be, yeah.
Maybe sometimes in California, because we don't get a lot of rain, people don't know what to do or don't seemingly know what to do when the rain happens. Okay, that's a very good one. Anyone else? Okay, now we got some people thinking here. There's one. Oh, go ahead.
Negative criticism from people?
Yeah. You know where it specifically triggers me? When I see it on social media. When I see somebody put a post up and then somebody else argues with them, and it gets something going inside of me, like I want to defend one of the individuals, but then I realize what is going on and I have to stop myself and I realize, okay, this is not something I need to get involved in.
The issue is just social media.
Yeah, just social media. Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
I wanted to piggyback off of his driving comment. When people text and drive, I'm keeping Texas in mind because Texas apparently has no laws about texting and driving.
Oh.
And so every time I visit friends there, it revolts me. I get so worried. I start criticizing, and
I drive 80 and sometimes I'll see a car looking like it doesn't know how to stay in the lanes. And then I get up close to it and I see the person literally looking at their phone like this. And I'm going, you better look at the road, you might get hurt. But yes, those are definitely examples of people that, things that they say and do. This is really important that we're mindful of the things that trigger us. Because out of those things, we might be doing things that we don't realize we're doing that are affecting us if we're not mindful of that sort of thing. How about circumstances, though? These can include people, but these can also be things like the weather. Does anybody like a certain kind of weather and they don't like another kind of weather? Yeah. Okay. What was yours? What were you?
Well, that just made me think. I'm from Michigan, and when it snows in April, that irritates me.
You're like, it should be done already. Why is it still snowing? Yes.
The smell of rain before it comes.
Oh, okay. What does that trigger in you?
You know what? Memories that I just want to stay home and chill.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say with the weather, those of us who live in California and specifically up this direction, one of the things that can trigger us is smoke or fires, right? A lot of people in the last several years, we've been quite blessed in this summer because in the last several years, there have been fires after fires after fires and smoke just pervading all of the sky. And it's quite triggering for a lot of people. They're scared. They don't know what to do. They've lost power for days and that sort of thing. So that can be triggering, yeah.
When people sing happy birthday in 8 different keys.
That never happens at Weimar unless they're all the right keys and they're harmonizing. But yes, I've been some places where you wouldn't even know it was happy birthday except for the words, yes.
When you are looking through the Weimar canvas and you see in bold red letters, late assignment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'd be triggering. Or even hearing test or quiz for some people. Yeah. Did you want to say one and then we'll...
Yeah. You see an F?
Oh. Yeah, that can be a huge trigger for some people. It doesn't even have to be an F. For some people, it's anything less than an A could be a trigger for them, right? Yeah.
When you hear the police siren outside your house.
Okay, yes, that can be a trigger, or behind you in the car, that can be another trigger. So these are examples. I'm glad you're starting to pick up on this because this is what we want to be aware of. Not so much so that we can keep a list of all of our annoyances. That's not what we're doing here. It's to be aware of what are the things that specifically trigger me. And sometimes they don't even have to be that big. I've had times where, I've tried to get something done and then for some reason it doesn't work out. It could be just the toaster. I pushed the toaster down and 5 seconds later it popped up, but I was in the other room doing something thinking by the time I get back, my toast is going to be done, and I get back only to find it's still in the same condition that I left it and up. That can be a trigger for some people, and obviously for me, because I just mentioned it. But these are the things that we want to be mindful of in terms of ourselves. But if we have external, what else do we have? Internal. You all are very intelligent. Internal. Okay, so what is internal? Internal has to do with, and this is, please do not forget this, because almost every one of my clients forgets this one. I know you'll be a different group, but most of my clients forget this because this is the hardest one to recognize because it's the one most close to us. And internal has to do with our own thoughts and feelings. But these are different sort of feelings because if, for instance, I have an issue with anxiety, what kind of thoughts and feelings am I naturally going to have? Worried, anxious, those kind of. If I have depression, what kinds of thoughts and feelings am I naturally going to go towards? Sadness and hopelessness, yes. So when you think of internal, I want you to think of default. Default means each of us has a certain specific type of feelings and thoughts we tend to go towards because of our personalities, our temperaments, and those sorts of things. Now, some of us have grown up in certain environments that actually invoke these types of feelings, because if I grow up in a home where it's naturally darker and heavier in terms of, things that we talk about, maybe there's criticism, what kinds of thoughts and feelings do you think I'm going to go towards naturally? Critical, dark, heavy kinds of thoughts and thinking. So I don't necessarily have to have people in circumstances. It might have started with that, but at this point in my mind, in my head, these thoughts and feelings have already been there for a while. And they tend to come up even when something bad isn't happening. So I could be going through my day just fine, and I could have a thought like, life just isn't worth living. Now, nobody did anything. Nobody said anything. I didn't have a test come back that I got a poor score on. Nobody in front of me is driving the wrong way. I just have this thought that pops up over and over and over again. Now, as Christians, we know that the devil can have influence in those things because specifically, they might have started back with people in our lives. Maybe somebody said something to me that was quite derogatory and it sort of stuck with me, and even though that person is no longer in my life, those thoughts are still in my head. And they keep playing over and over and over again, even when I'm not trying to think about them, even when nothing seemingly should be insinuating those sorts of things. But I'm going to keep thinking about them because I keep going to them because I've always had them there, or at least for a long time. And the same with our feelings, too. If you've ever woken up in the morning and it felt like one of those big, heavy, what do they call them at the dentist office that they make you wear when you get your x-rays? Bib or something. Have you ever had one of those on you? They're really heavy. For some people who have depression, it feels like it's on them all the time. It's hard to get out of bed. It's hard to move. It just seems heavier to do that. And some of us naturally tend towards these things, these thoughts and feelings that are darker, heavier, anxious, and that sort of thing. So remember, sometimes if you have these, don't go, oh, well, who's the person or what's the circumstance that's going? It can just be those thoughts and feelings that keep replaying over and over again that are your activating event. That can be an activating event in and of itself. But when we talk about activating events, they're activating something. They're activating what the next letter is beliefs. Now, beliefs can be called anything. Why do we call it beliefs? Because it starts with a B, yes. Beliefs can be thoughts. They can be perspective,
Doctrines.
interpretation, anything that is something inside of my head that I think in response to these things. So a lot of people think that when this stuff happens, it automatically means I'm going to have some consequences. And the consequences are how I'm going to feel and what I'm going to do. Remember, I referenced these when we first started. These are the things that people come to therapy for. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I doing these things? Or I want to be doing something else. There's even a verse in the Bible about that. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Paul, I do the things I don't want to do, and I don't do the things I do. We're talking about the consequences of our beliefs, not the activating events. A lot of people think the consequences have to do with the activating events. Do you know that's not true, and I can prove it? Does everybody feel and do the same way when it comes to traffic? Is everybody just as frustrated with traffic as you are? Is everybody just as frustrated with people in your life as you are? Not necessarily. I'll give you an example of this. I don't watch football, so I don't know why I'm using this analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway. I have football player A and I have football player B. Football player A, we're going to talk about the activating event. Football player A gets injured while playing football. And football player A's injury is an injury that's going to take 6 weeks to recover from before he can play football again. So what's the activating event? It's external, it's a circumstance, and the circumstance is that he's injured and he can't play football for 6 weeks. Okay, football player B. He also gets injured, but he gets a neck injury or a spinal injury. What does that usually mean if you play football? You're done. You're not going to play football again. So which one of the two football players has the worst activating event? Football player B. Okay, let's go back to football player A. Football player A believes that he is nobody if he's not playing football. He doesn't believe that there's any value in life if he's not playing football. Isn't that a belief?
Yeah.
Yes. Football player B really loves football, but he believes football is just a part of life. And there are many other things that he can do with his life even if he can't play football. Football player A believes there's nothing he can do if he's not playing football. Which one is going to have the worst consequences in terms of how he feels and what he does? But I thought you just said that football player A has the better activating event in terms of the two. Do you see what I mean? It's not the circumstances so much that we go through or the activating event that we go through. It's what we believe about the activating event that causes the consequences. How many of you would like to have better beliefs about your activating events? What kind of consequences is football player A going to have? How's he going to feel? Depressed? Hopeless?
Helpless.
I have one person helping me here. Listless, okay. Yeah, angry. Do you know how many of us actually don't like to admit we're angry? Is there anything wrong with anger? It's not so much what's wrong with anger, it's what's wrong with what we do with the anger. And a lot of people have a hard time admitting they're angry when there are actually some valid things to be angry about. Is there anything that you can think of that would be appropriate to be angry about?
Injustice.
Injustice. Yeah, we have a term for that. It's called righteous indignation. You're angry for a righteous cause. Are there any other causes that we can be angry about? Should we be angry about sin and how it's playing out in the world? I'm angry about it. You don't see me punching walls and people, though. What can anger do in the right circumstances? What can somebody do if they have the right kind of anger?
They are motivated.
Yeah, it can motivate you to change things. Have you ever heard of the group Mothers Against Drunk Drivers? What does that suggest? I know some of us probably don't know the history of that. I don't know a lot of the history of that. But who do you think started that organization?
A mother whose son got killed.
A mother whose child got killed by a drunk driver. Do you think that parent was angry? But instead of going out and trying to, kill all the drunk drivers out there, what did they do instead?
Made the organization to
Help educate people on the effects of drunk driving, right? To stop it from happening again. Some of us are really angry about sin and how it's affecting people. One of the things that makes me really frustrated and really angry is watching somebody continue to hurt themselves over and over and over again. I'm not even talking about self-harm behaviors or suicide. I'm talking about living a life that just deteriorates them, intoxifies everything that they're doing, that maybe infects their relationship with their children or their relatives or whoever it might be. That makes me angry. But you know what I do with my anger? I try to help people with it. I try to teach them better ways of doing things. So anger can be appropriate if we do appropriate things with it, if we have the right beliefs about it, about those things. What is football player A most likely going to do with his life? How long does a football career last? Does anybody know? 4 years? I've heard people say as much as maybe 10 years. If you're Tom Brady, I think he's probably extenuating that 10-year record. I don't know. But that's not a very long time to have a career. I've had a much longer career than that. So what happens after 4 years when you age out or get another type of injury or your body can't do it anymore? What's he going to do? Even though those 6 weeks are up and he can play football again, what's he going to do after those 4 years or even at the most 10 years? Remember what he believed? He's nothing if he's not playing football. What do you think he's going to do after?
Self-destruct.
Self-destruct, specifically though. Drink, maybe substances. Oh. What else?
suicide.
Maybe self-harm. Anything else? How is he going to be in terms of his family? Maybe distant from others? He doesn't want them to see that he's nothing anymore. Not because they believe he's nothing, but because he believes he's nothing. A lot of people isolate when they have unhealthy thoughts and beliefs.
You might marry someone that makes him feel good.
Oh yeah, he might go, this is the thing about our behaviors. Some people do one thing while other people do the extreme opposite of that thing. So sometimes people overcompensate and they start doing all kinds of things to try to make themselves, while one person might be holed up in bed, sleeping all the time and not wanting to get out, the other person might be doing the opposite, like constantly consuming things that try to make them feel better about themselves. And sometimes consuming things even means relationships, jumping from relationship to try to fill that emptiness and stuff. Maybe even waving money around until he's completely bankrupt, that sort of thing. So it can be the opposite too. Overcompensate. What do you think football player B is doing? Now remember, what was his activating event? He had a spinal injury, which means what? Can't play anymore. What do you think he's going to be feeling? Now maybe he's,
Sad that he's.
Yeah, he might be appropriately sad, right? He might even be angry for a while. All the energy that he put into it, but is it going to be the same kind of angry that The other one?
More like a frustrated feeling.
Yeah, maybe a frustration. Yeah. How about other feelings that he's going to have? If this one feels hopeless, maybe hopeful. Yeah. What do people who play football do after they retire? Some people do. Huh? Yeah, a lot of them become a sports commentator. Yeah. What do others do? Sometimes people start, what did you say? Yeah, they can start their own business, maybe be what do they do when they're paid by companies to, yeah, they get sponsors and that sort of thing. They also maybe start charities. Yeah, they start charities and stuff to help people, or maybe go around and talk to schools and that sort of thing and inspire kids and those kinds of things. So the behavior is going to be quite different, and the feelings are quite different. Why? Because the beliefs are different. So if we look at this and we look at football player A, this is the problem. A through C is the problem. I'm not going to ask anybody to raise their hands, but maybe you're experiencing A through C. You have a lot of activating events in your life that are causing you to believe irrational and self-defeating beliefs. Do you know, though, that this is actually a choice? Do you know why it's good news that this is a choice? Because you can change it. If it's happening because of you, then you can do something about it. I can't change all the people and the circumstances in my life if I want to. Can I make all of the traffic go away because it's time to go to work and I just don't want to deal with it? That would be a great superpower if we had it. But I don't know anybody that has it. The only superpower we have is to leave at 2 a.m. to avoid the traffic. But other than that, I can't change the circumstances and I can't change the people in my life. But I do have a choice as to what I believe about these things, and that is what creates the consequences. But A through C is what we call the problem. And a lot of people are cycling from A to C and A to C because of their beliefs, and they don't realize this is actually why their lives are suffering so much.
You mean the consequences become triggers?
Well, they're cycling because the more they do it, the more it keeps coming back around. The more I'm doing these behaviors, the more I'm feeling these feelings, what other kinds of activating events am I going to experience? If I'm using substances, what's a new activating event that's going to start happening?
Cravings.
Okay, cravings. Yeah, those can be feelings and stuff that keep coming up that maybe I've even generated myself. But what about people? Maybe my family starts getting involved and saying, hey, Amanda, we're not happy with what you're doing. You're letting us down. Now I have another activating event that I have to deal with, another problem, another situation that I have to deal with. And then, what can I believe about that? Oh, see, my family's all on my back. Why won't anybody let me alone? Just give me some space. And then, how am I feeling and what am I doing? And it just keeps cycling over and over and over again. This is where Satan would like to keep us. I believe one of the best things that we have is the ability to think. And oftentimes, I actually think that right now, the last battlefield that Satan is really affecting us in is our mind. I've met many people who've had very difficult circumstances. I've met people who have lost a leg or lost their ability to use their body. And yeah, it's a frustration, but they're still who they are. What happens though when our mind starts going in a very self-destructive way? That's when people start saying, I don't feel like myself anymore. I'm struggling more and more and more. And that thinking, that negative thinking, that irrational thinking just keeps making it worse and worse. And a lot of people have a problem that they're not diagnosed with, and it's called a delusional disorder. Now, we have a very specific way that we define that, in psychology. But the problem is a lot of people have a delusional disorder that haven't been diagnosed with it, because delusional just means a break from reality. And a lot of us have broken from reality in our thinking. And so we're suffering with this over and over and over again. So what I'd like to do is, since this is the problem, let's fix the problem. So what can we do? When we find out that the circumstances are negative, or the consequences are negative, we have to recognize that there's something wrong with the belief. Now, the whole belief doesn't have to be wrong. Sometimes I meet people who have the belief that, everybody is valuable in life or in this world except for me. Now, the first part of that's true. The second part is not true. And so they think, oh, well, it's true because, everybody's valuable, but then they make this little disclaimer, but I'm not valuable. There's nothing valuable about me. And so they change something that's mostly true and change that little part until it's not true just because of that part. And there's a gentleman who he was a war strategist. I don't know if he's still alive, but his name was Conrad Kellen. And he said the definition of propaganda, or I like to think of also the definition of a lie, is a half-truth, a partial truth, and a truth out of context. And a lot of us are believing lies, but we're not recognizing them because they're a half-truth, a partial truth, and a truth out of context. And so what we need to do is, when we recognize that there must be something wrong, and how do we know that? Because the feelings are largely negative, and I don't mean all of them. We know that there are some appropriate times when we should feel sad and things like if you've lost a loved one, but especially when these are negative, when our behaviors are negative. Anytime your behavior is negative, what does that mean? I probably am thinking the wrong thing right now. So I need to do the D, and the D stands for dispute. Dispute. So what am I disputing? I'm disputing the B, because there's something wrong with it because it's leading to the C. So when we dispute, we have to ask two questions. The first one, is this true? Why do we have to ask that? Do you know how many things we think and we've never even stopped to ask, is this true? How do we know something's true? How do you know something is true in a court of law?
Evidence.
Evidence, yes. So, in order for something to be true, we have to have evidence. What is our best source of evidence as Christians? God's Word. Absolutely. If I'm not taking the things I believe and comparing them with God's Word, where am I?
Nowhere.
Delusional. A lot of people in this world are delusional because they don't accept God's Word as the truth. And I can take a lot of things to God's Word and ask Him if it's true. Things about myself, my value, things about other people. I can take those things to God's Word and consider whether they're true, right? But the second question I have to ask is it helpful? Why do I ask this question? There are a lot of things that are true, but they're not helpful. Say, for instance, my boss gives me, or let's go with school since you all are in school. Say your teacher gives you an assignment or a test or something, and say, for instance, you study pretty hard or at least adequately, and you get that test or that quiz or that assignment back, and a less than adequate grade is put on that, and you get it. It could be true that you didn't do well, or maybe that it wasn't enough to get a certain grade, but is it helpful to keep thinking about it all day, every day, all week, all month, all year, all 4 years, or however many years you're here? Is that helpful to think about that? You know what's happening while you're thinking about that situation? Actually, it's not what's happening, it's what's not happening. What is not happening when you're focused so much on the grade that you just got? You're not giving yourself the opportunity to grow from it. A lot of people fail in life. I mean, literally fail. They lose money for their company. They might even get fired. I've been fired in my life. You can ask me to tell you the stories. I've actually been fired 4 times. It's surprising I still have a job and people want to hire me. The first 2 were babysitting jobs. The third was, I was literally the janitor in my college. Do you want to know how I lost that job? I used to clean the girls' dorm after I got back from my class at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I cleaned from 2 p.m. until 5 p.m. And at 5 p.m., do you know what happened? All the girls came back to the dorm from their classes. Do you know what happens after that? All the cleaning that I had done is no longer evident because they're using the rec room, they're using the kitchen, and believe me, that kitchen was pretty gross. Girls can make really gross experiences in kitchens too. It's not just boys. But these girls would I had to threaten to throw dishes and cups away because I'd find them in the sink with all it was just gross. And I vacuumed and I dusted and everything. And do you know what time my supervisor would come and check on my work? 8 o'clock at night. And you know what she told me? She says, you know, Amanda, I'm going to have to let you go because the dorm's not clean and I'm afraid that you're not doing a good enough job. I was sick to my stomach. But I didn't give up. I said, would you be willing to come back tomorrow at 5 o'clock instead of coming at 8 o'clock to see what I'm actually doing? And she was willing to come back at 5 o'clock instead, and she did see that I was doing my job. So I did get my job back. That was the only time out of those 4 that I got my job back. But the 4th one was actually professionally as a therapist. I lost my job. I guess you could call it fired. She didn't say I was fired, but she says, I need to let you go. And that was because, I'll just say not all therapists are healthy therapists, and she was a therapist too. And she had her own struggles that she was dealing with. Sometimes my profession attracts people who haven't figured their lives out yet. And so they're trying to figure it out as they do the therapy. But I won't say any more about that. But in terms of helpful, I could have told myself many times, and I was tempted to, who's going to hire me? In fact, that last time that I got fired, I was tempted to believe that. What happens when you've been fired and you have to go apply for other jobs? And does anybody know what it asks you on every application? No, it doesn't ask you, have you been fired? It's broader than that. Why did you leave your last job? And I was like, no, God, I don't want to do this. And I thought to myself, I wouldn't even hire somebody if they put I got fired on their application. But do you know what? I thought to myself, I wish I hadn't thought this part. I wish I had just trusted God. But I thought to myself, if I don't put this job, because I was only at that job for a month and a half before I got fired, so I wasn't even there that long. I won't tell you all the things I had to deal with there. But I was tempted not to put that on there. And I thought to myself, what if this person finds out, though? That would be a really bad thing for them to find out later. But I also realized, too, this was one of the first times that God put it in my mind to consider He is ultimately my employer. Amen. He is ultimately my employer. And so if He wants me to have a job, He'll find a job for me no matter what. So do you know what I put on the next 3 applications jobs I applied for? I wrote on that nice little line that they have there, I wrote, I was fired on all 3 of the applications. Does anybody want to guess how many of the jobs I was accepted to? All 3. I was shocked. I was like, what? Do you know one of those employers, do you know what they said to me? They offered me the job and they said, you are the best applicant we've ever had for this job. I was like, what? And then he went over my application and he said, wait, who was the person that you worked for? Do you know where my brain went to? My brain went to, oh, great, he's going to rescind on his offer now because he just realized I was fired and he's going to know this woman who fired me. And I went catastrophic thinking all over the place. I told him, do you know what he said to me? He said, I know that woman. You have nothing to be worried about. I was like, what? What are the chances that you know this person and you're actually having this kind of response to it? I felt so vindicated. I felt so vindicated. And I remember going out to my car afterwards and sitting in my car and praying and thanking God for that experience, but especially thanking him that he didn't have to let me know that. I could have just questioned the rest of my life. Why did I get fired? What did I do wrong? Why did this happen to me? And God actually vindicated me. And he told me through someone else, hey, Amanda, it's okay. This isn't about you. This is about that woman. And so, spending all of our time thinking about something that's not helpful, it only keeps us from doing the next thing. What could I have told myself? Oh, see, nobody's going to hire me. This will never work out. I'm going to lie about what happened. I was only at the job for a month and a half. That's not helpful to do. What is helpful? I'm going to go forward and trust God to take care of this. I'm going to learn from the experience. And I did learn from the experience. She also paid me half of what she promised to, so I got a much better job afterwards. I thought I was working with Laban at first. But when we ask the question, is it helpful, we want to see, does it help me move forward or does it keep me stuck? I think Satan would love to have all of us stuck. We're not a threat to him when we're stuck, are we? We're not a threat to his work. Yes?
How do you decide how much time to give to a negative? 10 minutes, 1 day, all done with it?
Okay, so here's the thing. Do you know when, I'm glad you asked me this because I actually want to spend some more time, just a little bit more time on this evidence part. A lot of us get stuck on things. Do you know why? Because our brains naturally want to fill in a blank, even when we don't have all the answers. So for instance, say any one of you is, I don't know, walking down the sidewalk or something here, and somebody seemingly from this room, maybe somebody you know, gives you a look. You know that look where you're like, why did they look at me like that? What did I do wrong? Okay? And what winds up happening when you get that look? You start thinking about it, and one of the behaviors that we do is something called rumination. This is actually in our mind, but where do we get this word from? Anybody have any animals at home? Any cows, sheep, goats? If you have any of those animals, you know that they ruminate. They chew on something and they keep chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing. You could see a cow out in the field, hasn't taken a bite in minutes, and I'm saying that like a cool way. They haven't taken a bite in an hour and they're still chewing. Why are they chewing? Because that's how their digestion works. They just chew and chew and chew, and it goes down and comes back up, and they chew and chew. We do this as human beings, though. Something happens, and we keep chewing on it and chewing on it and chewing on it. We do something called rumination. We just ruminate on it. And the longer you ruminate on something, no longer is it exactly the way that it happened. It starts changing. Little by little by little, kind of like the story of the guy who catches a fish, and the first time it's this big, and then the second time it's this big, and the third time he tells the story it's this big, and you're like, what? That's what we do when we ruminate. We take something, say the way that person looked at me, and the more we think about it, the more it changes even what happened. Oh, maybe it's what I'm wearing. They don't like what I'm wearing. And we've never even stopped to ask them, like, hey, did you notice that you looked at me a funny way when I was walking down the sidewalk? Our brains do not like to leave blank spaces. And so we will fill it in with anything, even if it's wrong. So one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to give yourself the opportunity to say, you know what? I don't have enough evidence, and so I'm going to leave it alone until I get more evidence. Isn't that what they do in courts? If somebody comes with just a little bit of evidence or not any evidence, the judge will throw it out of court and just say, come back when you have more evidence. We don't like to do this as human beings, though. We have this really weird thing in our brains that we have to fill it in, even if we're wrong. I think this is one of the reasons there are so many discussions and disputes and arguments between people, because we're reading into stuff that isn't even there yet. But we think we know, and sometimes this has to do with our own pasts and stuff, that we start filling in blanks and we haven't thoroughly listened to or given ourselves the opportunity to get all of the evidence. And so when you ask how much time should we spend on it, well, one of the factors is, well, how much evidence do I have? Do I really want to spend 2 days thinking about this when I'm pretty sure that I don't have enough evidence, or I want to go ask for more evidence or get some clarification on what actually happened, or talk to my teacher about my grade if there's anything that can be done about it before I start hating on my teacher, for giving me this grade, that sort of thing. So these are the 2 questions that we ask ourselves, but we're not done with disputing. Yes?
I'm pretty sure that bee in my bonnet has worn a path so deep that it's hard to stop that.
It is hard to stop it.
That's easier said than done to stop it.
Yes. I'm giving you a very practical, simple way of doing this, but it doesn't mean the process is actually simple, the years and years that we've actually believed these things. And just like if you go down to the river, do you know why anybody been down to the confluence yet? If you haven't, or any of the paths around the campus, do you know why those paths are there? Because people have been walking over them over and over and over and over again. Do you know that if nobody walked over them, there would be no path, there would be all kinds of plants growing up in that area? But this is the same way with our brains. The more we go over something, the more likely we are to go over something. Go over that thing because it's the path of least resistance. I don't have to. What happens when somebody is a trailblazer? They're a trailblazer because they're literally cutting down, trampling on something. They're doing the hard work of it, of getting that down. So just like if we wanted a new trail here at Weimar, you'd have to trample on it and bulldoze it and do all kinds of things to get it to be a path, have a lot of people keep walking over it in order for it to be that way. And that's the same way with our brains too. The only way we're going to change something is if you actually go through this on a daily basis. I'll get to that though a little bit more. So dispute, I have to ask the question, is it true and is it helpful? And within these questions are actually a lot of other questions. So for instance, if I'm looking for evidence and I want to know, is it true? I can ask, how many people are saying this? Do you know a lot of times we will think something over and over and over again, only one person has said it to us? We're using one person as our form of evidence. If you're doing a survey and you only ask one person, is that a good survey or a bad survey? It's a really bad survey. You need a lot of people. And you know what? Even with a survey, do you know you have to ask the question right? I got called once. I don't know if any of you have ever had this happen. I got called once, and I believe it was regarding Hillary Clinton when she was running for president. Was that 2016? And the surveyor, the person asking me the question, asked me a loaded question. Like, it was something along the lines of, how happy are you that Hillary Clinton has done this? And I was like, what? That's not giving me the option of not liking what she did. They're already asking it in a way that's directing me to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm really excited. I'm giving you a 10. They didn't ask me, like, are you happy? But even that is influencing me to the positive versus what do you think about, good or bad? So that's a more balanced question. When we have these questions, we have to ask ourselves other questions within these. This is something called Socratic questioning, just in terms of therapy. Where do we get that word from? Socrates. Socrates was a philosopher. What do philosophers like to do?
Philosophize.
They like to ask questions. Sometimes they don't like to come to answers necessarily. They just open the door for another question. But as we ask these questions to ourselves, and these two include maybe other questions as well, this is not enough. We have to then, what we call reframe. We are doing some remodeling on our house right now, and one of the first things that they did when they were we're pushing a wall out a little bit, and one of the first things they did was they had to frame the wall. What's the importance of framing a wall well? Yes?
You get a good structure so it won't collapse.
Uh-huh.
If something like an earthquake happens.
Yeah. What would happen if our contractor put in a piece of lumber that was rotting? It wouldn't hold up very well. What if the contractor didn't put wood? He decided, you know what, styrofoam's a lot cheaper, wood's really expensive right now. How would that have helped?
It wouldn't help.
When we do the disputing, we can't just leave it with, oh, is this true or is this helpful? There's nothing there. We still have this old belief that we're believing. We actually have to reframe the structure of our thinking. We have to put in a new piece of wood or new 2x4s and that sort of thing in to restructure our thinking. And so whatever I chose over here, I have to choose something else to replace it with. There was a story in the Bible about removing demons from a house. Does anybody remember that story? What happened when nothing was put in place of those demons? More came back. And do you know what happens if we just ask these questions and we don't put something else in its place? We just keep going back to the old belief. We just keep going back to the old belief. So we have to reframe. We have to put something else in its place that is both true and helpful. And what I recommend doing is when you do get that reframe, because a lot of times we have the same circumstances, the same people, re-inflicting us with those activating events, if you want to call it that, or the same old thoughts and feelings. If I want to reframe something, it's not enough to just tell myself it once. Because do you think Satan's going to stop throwing his darts at us just because I reframed it once? No, he's going to go, oh, Amanda, isn't that cute that you're trying to change your thoughts? But you know better. This is really the truth. And so I have to have that in my heart and in my mind. I have to keep telling it to myself over and over again. And sometimes what we have to do is even write that new belief down and carry it with us when we're tempted to believe the old belief again. And what I recommend doing is taking Bible verses that specifically relate to the old belief, but is a new belief that is counter to that old belief, and carry it with you until you've memorized it, until it's stuck in your heart, ingrained in your mind, and so you have no reason to be tempted to go back to this. But a lot of people will do this once and go, oh, it didn't work. I still feel the same way. Can you imagine going to the gym once, working out, stepping outside of the gym and going, I still look the same as I did when I went in. Obviously, this doesn't work. I'm not doing this anymore. No, we all know that you can't go to the gym one day, even a whole day. You could spend all 24 hours of the day in the gym, and you're not going to look different leaving the gym. Because what do we know about working out? You have to do it consistently and regularly over a period of time before it starts to make a change. And that's the same way with our minds too. We don't get any shortcuts with our thinking. It's the same as going to the gym. And I think a lot of people need to go to the mental gym. And God's giving us these crucibles we were talking about in Sabbath school today so that we can start working these things out so that we can overcome them. Some of us think that all of this stuff that I'm dealing with, why do I have to go through this? I got the short stick in life. Why do all these things happen to me? God wants us to become victorious. He wants us to become stronger mentally and emotionally. How do you do that if you're not working out your mind? Do you know, this strikes me as so fascinating, probably because I don't do it, but do you know how many people sign up for marathons, Ironmans, Tough Mudders, 10Ks, 12Ks, 30Ks, whatever Ks they are, and they'll actually pay money to do this? I mean, you might get a medal and a t-shirt out of it, but people will spend good money. I know people who will fly to other countries and other cities and states to do these things. That's a lot of investment, financial investment to do it. Why do they do it when they get sore through it? When some people are taking pain medication before they even start the race because they know that this race is going to inflict on them some pain. But I don't know of anybody that goes, you know what, I'm having a really difficult time at my job with my boss. Yes, I would pay for this if I could, because this is working out my mind and my mental and emotional well-being, because I'm going to get victory over this and I'm going to get to the finish line. Nobody does that. I think it's crazy that we're willing to spend all this money on our physical selves, but we're not willing to go through even the free stuff that we get mentally and emotionally to be stronger mentally and emotionally. Now, if you look at me, I am not intimidating physically. But the one thing I do have is the things that God's allowed me to go through, because I am a lot stronger mentally and emotionally than I used to be when I was a lot younger. I don't have the depression and anxiety that I used to experience, because God's taught me through everything that He can be trusted. Every single thing. I know what He's capable because He's already proved that to me, and so I can trust Him. And so I have a lot of new beliefs that I didn't have before. A lot of new beliefs in my mind because I've reframed them, because God's helped me, because I've gone through different things. But do you know the cool thing? When we do this dispute, something comes out of it. Effective change. And we call it effective change because it starts with an E. Effective change just means, how am I going to feel and what am I going to do when I've reframed my old beliefs? A lot better. Now, it doesn't mean I'll never get angry, I'll never get sad, I'll never feel helpless in a situation. It just means, am I going to feel the same level of it that I used to? No. And am I going to do the same things that I used to? No, because my thoughts are different. It's okay to have difficult feelings, but what we believe, even going through them, is really important, because as we change our beliefs, we're going to have new feelings and new behaviors. But this is even the coolest part. Because a lot of people don't like their activating events. But the more you change the way you believe, and you're going to have better feelings and better behaviors that come out of it. Do you know even the people in your life aren't going to affect you the same way? Maybe it's only because you're not acting the same way towards them. Maybe you have a different attitude when those people say and do the things that they used to do, because you're thinking about them differently. Maybe the circumstances. Maybe when you've got that traffic that you're experiencing, maybe you decide to listen to a podcast or Spirit of Prophecy or the Bible on tape. Do you know there are sometimes, have you ever stopped at a light and been disappointed that the light turned green?
Yes.
Why was that?
Because I wanted a break.
Huh? Okay, listening to something? No, that's not it. Somebody texted you and you want to text them back. And you're disappointed that the light turned green. Isn't that ironic that other times you're disappointed that the light turned red? But then there are those times when somebody just texted you and you're like, oh, I really want to see what they wrote to me, but I don't want to look. Please turn red. And you wouldn't actually say that, but you know deep down that's what you're thinking. Those circumstances aren't going to affect you the same way. Sometimes I've been late to work. I'm not perfect, but sometimes I've looked at those things and I've gone, you know what? It's my own fault. I'm not upset with the traffic that slowed me down because I know that I wait until the last second to leave for work, and it's only my fault that that's happened in the first place. So it doesn't bother me anymore. I'm like, here's just another reminder, Amanda, that you should have left earlier. And so the people and circumstances don't affect you. But remember those old thoughts and feelings, those default things that we often experience? What's that saying? The plant that you water is the plant that... I'm not watering those old thoughts and feelings anymore because I've replaced them with better thoughts. I'm not feeling those feelings so much anymore because I'm replacing them with better thoughts to affect those feelings. And so even this is going to start to change. What do you think about that? There's a verse. Would anybody be willing to look it up? It's Hebrews 12:2, and I'd love if you would read it out loud.
I can read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Okay, this is a verse that baffled me for a while. Does anybody notice something kind of odd in that verse? What was the activating event?
Enduring the cross.
There's a cross involved. And what was Jesus's feelings about going to the cross in there? Joy. Shame and joy, but specifically that joy part. Does that strike anybody as odd? Why would we have a verse in the Bible that says activating event leads to these feelings of joy? What must he have believed in order to have joy?
He believed that the consequences would be beneficial for everybody.
Okay, yeah. That's part of it, and that he would be able to spend time with us in heaven, that we would be able to be there because of the cross. Do you know we're all asked to carry our cross too? How can we think about our crosses? I'm just going to leave you with that one. I want you to think about that. Let's bow our heads. Dear Father in heaven, I want to thank you, Lord, that you have given us everything that we need in order to live this life and to be victorious in this life. Lord, I thank you for the minds that you've given us and the ways that you teach us to think. And in order to think, you've given us even the faith that you've given us, that small bit of faith that we can multiply, giving it back to you. And Lord, I'm just so grateful for all that you've done for us and all the ways that you're leading us and all of your promises in your word that we can take hold of as we're going through the things in this life. And I ask that you help us to be faithful to the minds and opportunities and resources that you've given us. Help us to be good stewards of our minds and to take every thought captive and to be faithful unto the end. And Lord, help us to bring many people with us. And we ask these things in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. As you leave, if you want to take a picture, again, you're welcome to, but I want to give you another homework assignment. I want you to find somebody who doesn't know this, and I want you to teach it to them. Do you know that's the ultimate form of learning? When you can teach it to somebody else. And don't tell them you need my help and I'm going to show you how to think better. Don't say it that way. I'd like you to say, you know what, I've learned something and I know that in order for me to learn it well, I need to learn to teach it to somebody. Would you be willing to listen to me teach it? And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them for you, but I need to learn this, so I need to teach it to somebody. That way you actually will be helping them, but you're not threatening them by making them think that they need a lot of help. But you're doing it for you too. I call that a twofer, 2 for 1. You're getting it and you're also helping someone else. So I will leave you with that.
Has this been helpful?
Yes.
Is it practical?
Yes.
You can apply it to your own life? Yes. So thank you, Amanda, so much. This is why we keep inviting her back year after year, because it is practical. It helps to change our thinking when we're thinking negative thoughts and maybe in a dark place. So feel free to come up afterwards and take a picture. So a couple of announcements. Tomorrow is a free day for the new students. The returning students are coming back to campus tomorrow, so it's a time for them to get settled in the dorm room. For the new students, if you are still working on your Weimar experience, your NSO module online, tomorrow's a really good time to be continuing to complete that. But it's also a good time to just hang out, get to know one another. Tonight, there is game night. The SA just informed me a little while ago. They're planning a game night in the Student Center. So if you're wanting something to do this evening, they're gonna start at 8:30, which is in about 10 minutes. So it'll be fun, a good time to hang out and mingle and get acquainted with other people. Monday, classes begin. So it'll be a new experience. I want to again welcome you to Weimar. You should already be signed up for classes. If somebody is not, let me know. There will be a meeting Monday afternoon if you look on your NSO schedule. There's a meeting right here Monday afternoon at 1:50, and it will be a time when we're all together, we're all assembled. The returning students will be here, new students will be here, faculty and staff will be here. So it'll be our first meeting together. Question, yes?
So what are the next journey to the class period?
Are you nursing?
No, I have, unless one of my class times changed, I stopped teaching at 3:30.
Okay, so the faculty know that that meeting is happening. They know that you need to be here. They also need to be here. So it may be that that class won't happen Monday, or it will be, it probably won't happen because we need to be right here. There's some communication things that we want to share, and we wanted the returning students to be here during that time. So your class won't be meeting. So, yes?
So what about for work ed? So we talk to the people who are